Still questions about the presidential preference election in Maricopa County, so we asked the Arizona Secretary of State to join us and see if it needs to be fixed and what they're doing about it. Welcome to the Mike Broomhead Show.
Well, I got a message, I got a song. Can I get a witness? Tell me what's going on. I show the people I've been away.
Still a lot of questions around the state of Arizona about Maricopa County's presidential preference election, the long lines, but most of all, some of the accusations that we're calling even voter fraud. Well, we're going to talk to Michele Reagan. She is the Secretary of State here in the state of Arizona. That comes up in a few moments. But we've got to get to the headline roundup. We call it the sweep. Let's start with the elections. Donald Trump mentioned a couple of names when it came to being vice presidential candidates. It's funny, all of them basically saying no thanks, but he mentioned 3 people by name, all of them saying they're not really interested. One of them is still in the race, Kasich. He said he's not interested. Neither is Rubio. And then how about Scott Walker as being a nominee? All of them so far saying no, thank you. But as you look forward, because as things are now about 200 delegates between Cruz and Trump doing very well in New York. As a matter of fact, this is going to be Ted Cruz. Probably his worst performance will be in New York because of the comments he made about New York. So Cruz is looking forward and believes California is going to get him where he needs to be. Watch this.
And I'm going to say a sentence that has not been said in 50 years. California is going to decide the Republican nomination for president.
A lot of delegates up for grab, and it's a winner-take-most state in California. Can that close the gap enough to get Ted Cruz within striking distance? I don't know that either candidate gets to Cleveland and the convention with enough delegates to win the nomination. But if you're going to have a contested convention, if it's very close, it could be anybody's ballgame. We're going to see what happens. Now, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan has been mentioned as a possible nominee. If it's a contested convention, will the Republican Party change their rules to bring on a nominee that wasn't even in the primary? Paul Ryan's name has been mentioned a few times. He had another press conference to denounce any idea that he might be the nominee. Watch this.
I believe that you should only choose from a person who has actually participated in the primary. Count me out. I simply believe that if you want to be the nominee for our party, to be the president, you should actually run for it. I chose not to do this. Therefore, I should not be considered, period, end of story.
It's a smart move by Paul Ryan. I think he needs to stay out of it. If the Republican Party wants to pull somebody else out of the crowd, it shouldn't be him, and I think that was a smart move on his part. Let's talk about the Democrats for a moment. Hillary Clinton does something that if any other candidate in the race did it, they would be publicly excoriated. This would be over for them. She was involved in a skit with the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio. Now, de Blasio is in the middle of this skit. First of all, it's not funny. There's nothing funny about this. Just to set it up, the play Hamilton, which has got a waiting list until next January to get seats, is the most popular thing on Broadway. They are doing a spoof. The man that plays Alexander Hamilton in the play Hamilton is on the set. It's by something called Inner Circle. That's this kind of improv group in New York. And he is playing Alexander Hamilton. Bill de Blasio goes back in time, and he's meeting Alexander Hamilton. Hillary Clinton goes back in time, and in this part of the skit, she is thanking de Blasio for his endorsement. I just had to set it up for you. Watch this.
I just have to say, thanks for the endorsement, Bill. Took you long enough.
Oh, snap!
Sorry, Hillary. I was running on CP time.
That's not, I don't like jokes like that, Bill. That's not funny.
Cautious politician time. I've been there.
First of all, it's not funny. Second of all, for those of you that don't know, CP time means colored people time. You name one other candidate in the race, Republican or Democrat, that could use that phrase or anything that alludes to colored people and get away with it. No one. She didn't take any heat. As a matter of fact, de Blasio doubled down and said it was a joke. Personally, I don't care if it's a joke. It just wasn't funny. But for everybody else that lives in this politically correct world, could another candidate get away with that? Hillary Clinton said, de Blasio's already talked about it. It was his skit, and she just basically blew it off, and the media went along with it. If Ted Cruz or Donald Trump did that, could you imagine what the media would do to either one of those candidates? There is a double standard, and it's nothing more obvious than it is in that one right there. Let's talk about Bernie Sanders for a moment. Bernie Sanders went to the Verizon strike. He went to support the Verizon strikers in Buffalo, New York. And he said Verizon, on any given year, hasn't paid a nickel in taxes. Well, the CEO of Verizon wrote a scathing rebuttal on LinkedIn. You should go and read it. And if you're a business owner, you got to stand up for yourself, because he said facts are a tough thing. And he said to Bernie Sanders, we have paid $15.6 billion in the last 2 years in income taxes. 35% tax rate for anybody who's counting in 2015. He went on to say, when Sanders said they've done nothing for America, they spend $36 billion just in America, well, most of it in America, on infrastructure. They spent millions of dollars in Bernie Sanders' home state of Vermont, and that was spent on infrastructure and buildings in Vermont. $42 million paying subcontractors and paying small and medium-sized business. So don't tell me that big businesses don't do anything for America. So that is what every big business should be doing. Thank God. I'm glad I'm a Verizon customer. It made me even more proud to be a Verizon customer. Stand up and tell the truth. Here in the state of Arizona, the bill to decriminalize marijuana is getting closer to being on the ballot. They need about 150,000 signatures to get on the ballot. They're at 200,000. They want to get closer to 225 before they turn in their signatures. Now, the city of Phoenix is put stricter zoning, or they're voting, of course, on the 20th. 4/20, if you don't know, is Marijuana Day. On 4/20, they are going to vote to relegate medical marijuana facilities to more industrial locations, just in case this bill passes in November. They don't want the medical marijuana facilities turning into recreational marijuana or pot stores. So they want to get them in industrial areas so they'll be further away from places of worship, residential areas, and daycare centers. So they're trying to do that now ahead of what would happen in that case. The Arizona Corporation Commission, Bob Burns is on the commission, and he's fighting dark money, and especially APS. Arizona Public Service gave money to a multitude of places. They're called dark money, where they're not saying who or how much. There are 2 members of the commission that were elected that Bob Burns says were elected because of APS money. He's voting no on anything that has to do with APS until he gets the answers he wants. Now, from my perspective, fight the battle if you want to, Mr. Burns, but you've got to do your job. And voting no on something you may otherwise vote yes on is not necessarily the right thing to do. The Coyotes want a new arena. They're asking the state legislature to create a tax haven or a tax district for them. And the Arizona Diamondbacks want the facility changed from county management in Maricopa County to the city of Phoenix. Everybody wants a new facility, or they want their facilities upgraded. How much will the taxpayers put up with? That's the question. In a moment, our 2-segment interview with Michele Reagan. She's Arizona's Secretary of State. We will talk with her in just a few moments. You're going to love it. Stick around.
The Mike Broomhead Show is brought to you in part by Cliff Castle Casino Hotel and Sanderson Ford.
All right, the Maricopa County elections made national news. I stood in the long lines with everyone else. So to get the bottom line of what's going on now, we asked the Arizona Secretary of State, Michele Reagan, to join us. Thanks. Got to be a rough time, or at least a busy time for you.
Busy week. It's been a busy week.
So let's start at the beginning of this. When the long lines were happening, were you aware of it while it was happening in Maricopa County? Was your office aware of it?
We were aware of it, and this was my first statewide election as Secretary of State, so I had nothing to compare it to. So as the phone calls started coming in, and our phone lines were very, very busy from folks, I kept asking people who had, on my staff who'd been there for other elections, is this normal? Is this
right?
Is this compared to other statewide elections? Is are we supposed to be getting hundreds and hundreds of phone calls like this? As I was pulling people to answer phones that elections isn't their division.
Right.
Keep in mind the Secretary of State's office has a lot of divisions, business services and
Right.
libraries and all sorts of, I had a gal who does bookkeeping and our CPA answering the phones as well. So it was, yes, we were aware of it.
It was interesting.
We sent
because
people out too.
At first, people were saying, wow, this is great. Look at the huge turnout.
Yes.
And they saw it as almost a positive. But when people were in line for 4 and 5 hours and they found out the reduction in polling places in Maricopa County, it quickly turned to people not being happy, and then the accusations of voter suppression started coming out.
Right.
And we played a couple of the audio bites from your comments about your office being kind of a clerical part of this, but also saying, why would anybody work so hard to register voters only to stop them from voting? So
Right.
where do you stand on that because of the town halls, the meetings you're having now? What's the stance of your office on that voter suppression aspect?
Well, just that is that everything that we work for as election officials, going out and registering people to vote, especially reaching into the 18 to 35-year-old demographic, which we were so excited to see so many of those first-time voters, and registering them. We held events with the Phoenix Mercury and Phoenix Suns where we were able to get in front of 4,000 young people and get them excited about voting. You don't do events like that just to then go out and want to deny them an opportunity to vote. So we were clearly very disappointed that for so many people, their first time voting experience was a fiasco. And we just need to make sure that two things. One, that never happens again to voters. And two, going back to people who, that we shouldn't, they now think that that's what voting is like. Well, voting's not supposed to be like that. And so we hope that that didn't discourage them from ever going to the polls again. So it's very, very troubling, and it's disheartening.
Well, there's a big difference between mistakes that were being made, and in the county recorder's office have admitted mistakes were made in the reduction of numbers. They didn't anticipate that many people showing up, and intentional suppression of votes, which is a small number of people making the accusation. Do you see value in the Justice Department coming and doing an investigation from somebody who has nothing to do with Arizona elections?
Right. Well, first of all, as far as suppression of votes goes, we categorically deny that anyone was trying to suppress anyone's right to vote because it goes against everything that we believe in as election officials. However, we would absolutely welcome and be very welcoming to any third party coming in on the federal level and investigating what happened, because we think that that's only going to serve to help everybody do their job better. We always say that there's nothing to hide from the truth. So the Justice Department has already sent letters of inquiry to the Maricopa County Recorder's Office, and they'll be going through and answering questions. And I don't think that's anything to be afraid of. So.
Do you work, when this happened, do you work with them, does the county recorder's office, do you work with them, since you oversee elections, with what happened in the fallout? Are there questions from your office?
Oh, absolutely.
There, and finding out, what happened to ensure it just doesn't happen again?
We do, and on top of that, not only are we working with Maricopa County, but you need to remember that there's 15 counties in the state, and for the most part, 14 counties went absolutely wonderfully. So there's also success stories in 14 counties that we're going and finding out what went right in those counties. Each county handles their elections differently. So we also need to go, as we compile all the information, as we do after every election. It's not like this is the only time that we do this. We compile all the information after every election. But what happened in Coconino County, up in Flagstaff, that went great? What kind of, for instance, without getting too much into the weeds, what kind of e-poll books do they use up there? Down in Pima County, what kind of tabulation processes do they have down in Pima County versus Yavapai County? Comparing all those things, because keep in mind again, all 15 counties use different equipment. They all have different ways that they perhaps set up the lines, different ways that they figure out what kind of polling places, or where to put the polling places, how many to have. So we're going to be comparing all that for best practices going forward, so that counties can share information and see what worked best and what didn't.
Okay, so we've got to take a quick break. If you can stick around, I want to ask what happened in Maricopa County, because it was the one that it happened in, to ensure that moving forward, because we have a primary and we have a special election coming up
May
and a general.
17th.
And then also to talk with you about the town hall meetings you've been hosting and the feedback you're getting from voters. So if we'll stick around for a few minutes, we'll be back in a few moments with the Secretary of State to find out more about what's happened and moving forward to make sure it's a good experience when you vote. So stick around. Okay, we are talking about the elections, what happened in Maricopa County and statewide in the presidential preference election. Michele Reagan, Secretary of State.
Thank you for calling it the right
Well, it's interesting. Let me ask you about this, because one of the things I noticed, because I spout off on the air and on the radio show, and we had kind of mocked the independent voters that were showing up, and I said, they've been saying all along you can't vote in this election. What were they thinking? Well, I got a web link, and it says you can vote in a primary if you're an independent. Well, this isn't a primary. It's a presidential preference election. I liked the interest, but it had to be disheartening to some. We did the math. 2,500 roughly per polling place in Pima County, almost 21,000 in Maricopa County. A big mistake was made. Has anybody identified yet what caused that? Just not to point fingers, but to show why it happened so it doesn't happen again.
Clearly, and Helen Purcell has said repeatedly she owns that mistake. She miscalculated very much so in the interest of people that were going to show up at the polls.
Crazy.
To go from 200 down to 60. And then on top of that, the amount of independents that showed up wishing to vote, and clearly there needs to be more information out there given to people for this one election that comes around every 4 years. And you really can't blame the public when here we go around and say, hey, independents, you can vote in primaries. You can vote in primaries in Arizona. Oh, wait, but not this one.
Because it's not a primary.
As it's not a primary. And then, and then we hear people calling it the presidential primary, when in reality, it's just what you called it, the presidential preference election. And it's got this crazy name, but that's exactly what it is. And it's not by definition, a primary. So it's it's a hybrid type of election in Arizona. It comes around once every 4 years. It is very confusing. I think we really need to look at in 2020 what we want it to actually be. It certainly shouldn't. Clearly, the way it is now is not working.
Well, it's interesting because the primary is coming in August, and so just to
that's the real primary that everyone votes in.
And just to clear that up,
we want them to vote.
In the Senate race in Arizona, Senator McCain is being challenged in a primary by Kelly Ward, and there's some other people on the ballot, and there are a bunch of congressional districts where there will be multiple people in the same party, so independents can go and pick a party, and they can vote in that primary.
And independents can be so powerful in those races.
Absolutely.
Especially in legislative races where they're so dominant by one party or another, where the race is in the primaries. So whatever candidate gets out of that primary in a legislative race, sometimes they have no general election. So the independents, if you want to have your say, it's in that primary. So we want them to go vote, and it's very, very hard. The presidential preference election is a very hard sell. So yes, we did have many independents show up at the polls in Maricopa County. And we had candidates too that were sending out emails statewide saying, independents, go vote in the polls.
Demand a ballot.
And we know that you can't vote, but go anyways and demand your right, and ask for a provisional, knowing that you can't, that it's not going to count, but just to make a statement. And I thought that was a little, I thought that was kind of obnoxious on behalf of some of the presidential campaigns.
It's interesting now moving forward, because you're hosting these meetings, and there's going to be one you've added to the list on Monday, correct? In South Phoenix.
Correct. It's not this Monday, it's the following Monday.
Following Monday,
so
okay.
It's, I believe that is the 25th.
Okay, and how is it being received? And when the voters are showing up with their complaints or with their telling you what happened to them, why they weren't able to, the party was changed or was supposed to and wasn't changed, how is it being received? How are you being received by them?
We love hearing directly from the voters. That's exactly where we're getting our best information from, is hearing what happened to them, either when they were in the polls or a lot of the people too are telling us, hey, I've always been on the permanent early ballot list, and guess what? This year I didn't get my early ballot. Or I've never been on the early ballot list, and this year all of a sudden I received one. So we need to hear those details, because what we're able to do is follow up with those specific voters and then backtrack and see what happened with their specific cases, so we can try to see if there's some sort of pattern in, comparing.
Is it
the
too early to
different
tell
voters.
if you found any patterns, or have
We're
you,
starting to find
okay.
some patterns, and this just isn't in Maricopa County, by the way. This is something we're seeing statewide, and it has something completely other to do than with the polling place issue. So this is really good, talking directly to voters. We love doing that. We've had some wonderful discussions with people both in Maryvale, last night at the Church of Beatitudes. Tonight we'll be out in Gilbert, which was another area where we saw really, really long lines. So it's a great opportunity to get out, meet some folks. And then we just added one in South Phoenix.
But it's going to be the special election coming up in May, and then we've got a primary, and then the general, and it's going to be a different experience. People are going to be able to vote.
There'll be a lot more polling places,
Yep.
which is great. We think 116
Good.
polling places for the May 17th election. And you'll be able to go to any polling place in that election. And then in August and November, the real primary, and then the big general election, it'll go back to what's called precinct-based polling, where you go to your specific polling place, and then there's a lot more than the in Maricopa County than the 116. That's where it doubles even a lot more than that. So.
Well, I know that you are. It's a very busy time for you. We appreciate the explanation. And
No, we
coming in
love
and talking.
elections, so we'll talk about it anytime.
All right, thank you. We
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
so much. This
We'll be
was
back.
fun.
Don't go away. Each week we do it. It's something specific to Arizona and something that makes you smile. It's called Broomhead's Best. This week, it's our friends at Sanderson Ford, big sponsor of the show, and they do a lot for veterans around the state of Arizona. And they got recognized at the Arizona Veterans Hall of Fame with their Copper Eagle Award, given to a corporate entity that works hard for veterans. I was honored to accept the award on behalf of Sanderson. They truly deserve it. They do a lot of work for the right reasons. Seats for Soldiers with every major sports team in Arizona, providing seats for men and women in our military, for military assistance mission and other organizations that help those families that are military and veterans around the state. So congratulations to Sanderson Ford. Now, we have something called #this. This week we're calling it Mamba Out. The end of a career. Kobe Bryant, 20 years, scores 60 points in his final game, leads his team back to a victory, which was rare for them this year. The Lakers not doing very well. But how about Steph Curry? 46 points, didn't even play the fourth quarter as the Golden State Warriors set a record. 73-9 is their record. But we pay tribute, as difficult as it is to a Laker, and an illustrious career for Kobe Bryant. We're calling it Mamba Out. So that's it. Coming up, we're going to do our segment in a moment to close things out. We'll talk a few things about the stadiums here in Arizona. Should we be building new ones? All that's right around the corner. Don't go away. Before we close out, the Phoenix Suns are going to get a new arena very soon. The city of Phoenix is going to be doing that. Now, we know that the Diamondbacks are asking that the Maricopa County Stadium District give up the stadium and give it over to the city of Phoenix in case taxes need to be raised to replace their stadium or to just repair and refurbish the one they have. Now the Arizona Coyotes are asking the state legislature to create a tax district so that a new facility for them can be built somewhere. They want to contribute $100 million. They want up to $300 or $350 million from taxpayers. Would it be a combined facility with Arizona State and their need for a facility for their hockey team, maybe even the ASU basketball team? How do you feel about taxpayer-funded stadiums? Personally, I don't mind them. I think they add to the community. I think you can see in Glendale with the stadium for the Cardinals with Super Bowls and Fiesta Bowls and national championship games and a Final Four, they can add to a community just like libraries can. Let's see your feedback. I'd love to have it. We'll be back next week. God bless.
Get more of Mike Broomhead on Facebook, Twitter, and of course weekday mornings from 6 to 10 on News Talk 550 KFYI.